Hey guys, it's Doug with North Table Mountain Christmas Lights, and I thought I'd take a moment here to do a behind-the-scenes walkthrough video of my display for the 2019 season. It's been a few years since I've done a behind-the-scenes video, and a lot has changed, so I thought I'd take a moment here to go over some of those changes and show you how I did everything. I'm also going to be doing a separate video for both the Mega Tree and the Snowflake Tower, since those have been very popular videos in the past, and a lot has changed with those props as well as how I've changed the build and design of them. So look out for those videos as well if you want to see the specifics on the Mega Tree or the Snowflake Tower. I'll start off here by showing you the Runway. I've had this the last few years, and I just run this in between songs as a skit between each song, and then after hours I have the Runway going as well. So it's not part of the main sequencing, but it's very cool part of it. It's actually missing some lights. No one else would know but me, but I'll streamline how this is built next year so it goes in much faster. But that's the Runway, and that's why it's there. Coming over here, the first big addition you'll notice are the mini trees. They're new this year. They're from Gilbert Engineering. Up on the house, I have 3 of these wreaths. They are also Gilbert Engineering. They are the baby mother of all wreaths, or the baby wreaths. 448 pixels each. They're awesome. I love those props. They're really cool stuff you can do with them. Above that is a spin reel max. I actually have 2 on the house. There's one up on one of the other eaves, or below one of the other eaves, kind of out of sight there on the camera, but love that spin reel max. Again, really cool stuff I can do with that. Also, the star up there on the house is new as well this year. That's another Gilbert Engineering. That's the Starburst. This one happens to be the 48-inch Starburst. They also have a 60-inch Starburst. But there's some really cool stuff you can do and a lot of submodels on it. Previously, I had a Bethlehem star there, and there wasn't that many submodels, and so I couldn't do a whole lot of interesting stuff with it. So this really changes things, and there's a lot of cool stuff I can do with that Starburst. Kind of behind here is a Rosa wreath. I'm not happy about this location. I just don't have a good spot for it. So I knew I had to get it up somewhere, so I just leaned it up against my fence. So I'll think about what I want to do this next season. I could put it on kind of the side of the house here, but it's not visible for people who park right out in front. But most people kind of park off to the side to get the corner view, so they could see it for that. So we'll see. Gotta think about where I want to put that for next year, or just leave it alone. Other thing here are these pixel poles. So they were new 2 years ago. They're P10 panel pixel poles, and they're one of my favorite props. They're really cool stuff I can do with these P10 pixel poles. I have 8 of them here, 6 on this side of the Mega Tree and 2 on the other. And they're really cool props, so I'll show you those here in a moment, a little bit more detail on those. And then I have, of course, just AC elements. I like having a little balance of kind of old school and new school, so I have some AC stuff here, some deer over there, a few more props out on the side, and then of course my trees. So these trees along the house, they all have lights in them, including that one on this side there at the end of the runway, and the ones in the backyard have them as well. So kind of no matter where you're viewing the house from, you see AC lights come on at their time in the sequencing, so I really like that part as well. The other thing we have here are the spiral trees, and they're one of the first props I built on the house back years ago, and they started life from Home Depot, kind of the standard AC lights. You rip those off and put pixels on them, so that's really cool. I also did the star on it, so I know some people don't put the star. I put pixels in the star, so there are actually 5 bullets at the end of each point and a square node in the center. So 6 pixels in that. So it's kind of cool. You can't do a ton with that, but hey, why not? So the first thing I'll kind of show a little more detail here are the pixel poles, since they're really cool. Now, it is a landmine with these pixel poles, the way I have them set up, so just with all the guy wires. So each pole has 4 guy wires, and I have 8 poles here, so we have a lot of guy wires just crisscrossing everywhere. So what I did on this is a frame, so you can see they're very thin. So it's a very thin setup here on the pole itself. It's just basically big enough for the panel. So the way I did this was, I think this was a 1x3, if I recall, from Home Depot, just some 1x3 yoke. And on the table saw, I put a little dado in here for the plexiglass that goes on the front, and then behind it I did another dado, wider one that's for the panel, that's big enough for the P10 panel and my little 3D printed mounts that connect the panels together. So I had those, and that just slides in. And then I took the 1x3, so I did that on both sides of it, and then I just ripped it down the center to give me my left and right sides. And then I just have a little backing on it that's just a removable kind of 1/8 inch or so plywood backing to it, and then the electronics are in this box. So how I'm controlling the pixel pulls is I have this small bud box enclosure here, and then inside of here is a small power supply. It's a Meanwell LRS, I think 75.5, so 5 volt, 75 watt power supply here. I have a distro board, the Falcon distro board, and a Pi Zero with a hat from Crockett Fantasy of Lights. And the hat can control on a Pi Zero, I think 9 panels, and they were just fine for this. So really cheap solution, because you can get the Pi Zero for $5, solder on the header, or get the Pi Zero for I think $13 with the header already on pre-soldered, and then this hat's like $10. So that's it, and super easy. You can control P10 panels. So I think these are perfect for Tune 2 signs and a small application like this. I would do color light, but I have 8 of these things, so it's just way too much time and money for it to make sense to do this out of a color light board. So the P10 panels from a Pi Zero and a hat work just fine. And one other thing here, so the ribbon cable, you can kind of see I ground down this little channel here for the ribbon cable so it doesn't get pinched when it comes here. So this thing seals up nicely there. The only thing I want to change on it, and I wanted to change last year and never got around to it, is right here, this power cable. I want to put a quick disconnect here so I can separate this from the panel for easier storage. So that's really the only change I need to do on that. Coming up, hopefully this next season I'll get around to it. So coming over here, I'll show you one other thing I do. Weave my way through the maze of guy wires. This is my little portable sound here for people who are on foot. So all I have an old power supply that I had years ago before I got started. So I got this little cheap Chinese thing. I don't use them for any pixels, but it's good for this. So I have a little outdoor power supply coming in here, so that's 12 volts because one of these needed 12 volts. So I think the amplifier needs 12 volts. And the, yeah, I can see that here. The amplifier needs 12 volts, and this little radio receiver needed 5 volts. So I have a little buck converter here that takes this to 5 volts for the little FM radio receiver and 12 volts for the little amplifier, and then that just runs these little outdoor speakers I have. So I have an outdoor speaker here just laying on the ground behind my Tune 2 sign, and I have one over there by the mega tree, and so that just allows people here to hear the music at a pretty low level when they are just on foot. So that's really nice, and I have that controlled on behind my porch. I have a Pixel 2 Things board, and this is just running off a script on the Falcon Pi player. So at showtime, the script triggers that AC channel to come on, it powers everything up, and then when the show's over, it powers it off. So that works really well. Now I'll show you something on these mini trees that I did. So I have a 3D printed design that I came up with for the whole mounting system, so including both the star and the tree itself. So I have a little front plate. I did that in blue because I kind of thought the color contrast in the daytime looked cool. And on the back side of it, we have this 3D printed plate here, which attaches onto 1/2-inch EMT, a little set screw to tighten it down and clamp it down. And so this thing slides off, and I have a connector here, so I can, oh, that's the other end, but I can pull this off and disconnect the star easily. But what's really cool is the setup here. I don't know how much I can see, but so you can see I have a piece of rebar there, just driving into the ground, and then up here, if we can see it, is a 3D printed system. Alright, it was just easier here to take the tree off the rebar so you can see what's going on. It's just a piece of rebar, looks like 1/2-inch rebar that goes into the ground there, and then here is this 3D printed mounting system. So I happen to be using aluminum channel, since that's just what I had on here. I'm thinking I might design this as well to work with 1/2-inch EMT for those cross braces as well. But as you can see, there's some 3D printed parts on the outside, and then a hub in the center which connects those, and also has a hole there for the EMT that runs vertically through the prop, and then there's also a top piece on the cap there that gets screwed into the HDPE at the top. And so this creates a really cool mounting system. So this is something I will be offering later on this year, both the STL and the printed files for anyone who wants to do this setup for the mini trees. I ran out of stakes because these are supposed to have, as you can see here on the edge, little holes so you can put a small landscape stake on a couple of the corners and just keep it from turning in the wind. So I had all of these done except I think the last 3 here, and we have 85-mile-an-hour winds here this year and they didn't even move, so I don't even think that's really necessary, but it's there if you want it. So anyhow, that's a really cool setup for the mini trees. Another really cool thing here are these pathway trees that I have lining my driveway. So they started life off at Lowe's years ago, and I took the AC lights out of them and put pixels in them. So each branch, each one of these 6 branches on the lower have pixels, and there's 1 pixel in the center, so 7 pixels total in the tree. And they kind of act like pea stakes back before pea stakes, because you can do some really cool rotational effects and jumps and cool things with them. And as a bonus, they look like trees, so they're aesthetically look really nice in the daytime, and they add a kind of cool, fun element at night because they still keep, of course, the tree shape, and it just looks a cool, fun prop. And despite the green exterior on them, you still see all the colors true. So if you put blue, red, yellow, whatever, you still see those colors through this pretty well. And just to line these things up, I just have the 343 Ts. These happen to come from Ray Wu, but that way the one wire allows for data in and data out. And then I just have the T's connected one after another, and that provides my spacing. So I have 20 of these on each side of the driveway for 40 total in the display. Coming over here, I have the candy canes. These are the ones from Holiday Coro, and they're 16 pixels or pixel modules in each one. They're just a kind of cool 3-dimensional prop. Being 16 pixels, you can't do a ton of effects with them. It's just kind of chases and back and forth stuff, but they look really cool. And the 3-dimensional aspect is something that you don't get for other props. So despite their limited pixel count, they're very useful in the display and add a cool element. Up on the house, I have my outline here, and try and get this where my shadow's not in the way. So I have vinyl siding, as many of you know, and I've created a whole host of clips that work with vinyl siding. And you can see some of these here. These trim pieces go along the lower pieces of trim, and then you just clip PVC into those. There's a different type of clip here for the verticals sections that they clip into. More horizontal pieces, and if you get to a corner, then I have these corner pieces that clip around the outside corner trim of vinyl siding. And you might say, well, this isn't really at the corner. Well, you can't tell this at night, and there's a reason why I have this here offset in the design as opposed to in the corner, is you need the flexibility in this clip to make the bend around the corner. And if you put this kind of clamp here closer to the edge, you lose some of that flexibility. So really you don't see it at all at night. So it just looks like it's on the corner. So I have those, and each little section has its own little connector at the end of it, so they're quick and easy to disconnect, and I have them labeled consecutively, so that works very well for the installation. Then I just have icicles up here. Nothing fancy on how they attach. I just have little eye hooks every 24 inches or so on the fascia, and I just zip tie them to that. I honestly prefer the look of just dangling pixel icicles as opposed to the pre-formed icicle shapes that you can get from the various manufacturers, just simply because, I mean, this to me it's more traditional looking than the icicle form shape, and I like the free-flowing look. And yeah, they dangle in the wind and such, but text, you can still do text. I have several songs that have text that scrolls on the icicles. You still make out the text. Same thing with shapes, and during my Runway skit I have an airplane that runs across here and flies across the icicles, and you can see that. Yeah, it's not the highest resolution, but you can see what it is. So anyhow, those work out really well. What's really cool here is how these wreaths attach. So I had the baby wreaths, and I wanted to attach them to my porch columns. So what I came up with is I designed this 3D mount, and the files are out there on Thingiverse for this. And it's a clip that, or the mount zip ties to the frame. So there's a flat part that mounts to the Coro. Then you have a spacer here and another flat part, and I put some neoprene on the back so it doesn't scratch the porch columns, and then 2 slots to zip tie in. So they are an absolute pain to install because you have to get back there with needle nose pliers to put the pixels in that go around it, but they will fit, they do go in, and I wanted to keep this distance as close as possible. I could have made these wider and out further from the column, but that would have made it easier to install pixels, but I want them as close as possible, and they are just rock solid. They do not go anywhere. So that's those. And here's the command center for all the pixels on the porch. So I built this new box this year, and inside of here, this is a bud box. I don't know the model number. It's one of the really big ones. So inside here, I got a lot of stuff going on. So we'll start off here with the Raspberry Pi. So I run master remote. So I have a master in the house, and then everything outside is a remote. So here's a remote Pi. Ethernet out of there goes into the F16 V3. I have one expansion board right here, so I have 32 ports coming out of this box, and then I have the differential expansion board with that allows me to run the remote receivers. So really it's 2 expansion boards total on this, but that means that out here in the yard I have some remote receivers running in the mini trees. So each one of the mini trees has each set on the left and right side, there's a one receiver boards with 4 ports, 1 port for each mini tree with a small power supply. And I'm using the exact same bud box enclosures as what's in the pixel poles. So that same pixel pole, or the same enclosure for the pixel poles, is the same one I'm using on the mini trees. Only difference is I up the power supply to 150 watt Meanwell as opposed to the 75 watt one. So that's the difference there. I'm not using all the expansion boards yet, but I have some room for growth in future years on that. Also, I have the Pixel 2 Things boards. I have 2 of them in here, and they control the AC props in the front yard. And these have been great. I previously was using Renard controllers and just had some issues with the timings, just weren't as precise as I wanted. and switching to the Pixel 2 Things boards eliminated that. So the timings are just spot on. Looks really nice and really cleaned up the display from my eyes. I'm sure no one else noticed the differences, but these Pixel 2 Things have been awesome. So if you run Pixels and you like AC props, get one of these boards. They're phenomenal. So I have 2 of these in here, and some of you might be interested in this. I just have some LED lights that are kind of under the plexiglass here, controlled by this micro switch, which is controlled by the trigger. So when you open the door, they turn on, and when you close the door, they turn off. So that's kind of that. And that's just that little controller there is what controls those. So that's that guy. Over here, these are the same. These are 24 volt power supplies on a distro board, and I have a little fan there to provide ventilation as well. And these provide 24 volts for my floodlights, although those 3 there, those are the 10 watt ones, so they can run off 12 volts, but all my other power supplies or floodlights require 24 volts, so that's where that comes in from. And also my arches. So if you notice, do a quick detour on the arches. So over here at the arches, I have 2 lines that come in from the F16, one for the arches themselves and one for the arch bases. So there are 2 separate ports on the F16, and they're only providing the data and ground. I'm not providing power, since the power comes from those 24 volt power supplies. And then that comes over here. I'm using low voltage landscape wire for to bring the power over here. And so the 24 volts comes in to this buck converter that converts it to 12 volts. I have a fuse on it, and then a T that provides power to 2 arches. So one buck converter provides power to 2 arches. That comes over here to this area, and then these connectors separate the power, so only data and ground come through on those little connectors there. And then I come back over here, and there's another buck converter providing power to those 2 arches. Then back over here, those connectors separate the power, so there's no power that crosses. The V plus does not cross between those 2 sets of arches, and another buck converter over there, and so on. So that's how I control the arches. So over here along the side of my house, I have another controller in that box over there along the fence. That's an F16 V2, and it's providing pixel data for all the pixels along the fence, the snowflakes there, the rosa wreath. I have my runway over here that it's providing power to, as well as these floodlights. So these are the 24 volt floodlights I was talking about earlier, and the data comes from that controller on the fence, and the power comes from that 24 volt power supply we were looking at earlier. Also over here I have a Pixel 2 Things board that's controlling the AC elements, the trees along the side of the house and my backyard trees, and that is pretty much everything here at the lower level. Up next, we'll go up on the roof here, and I'll show you how I lay things out up on the roof. So we're up on the roof now, and this is actually towards the back of the house. I have my command center up here. So we have a Falcon Pi player running in remote mode, and an F16 V3 combined with a differential expansion board, and I'm actually running 5 remote receivers off this. So 4 receivers are off the main board, and 1 is actually being run off the F16 itself. Now, as you might have seen from the front of the house, I run my entire 360 degrees around the house. So everything back here, including on the back, I have lights. So to do that is why I have all the expansion boards up here. And I also have various types of clips I use to attach everything. So starting with the ridge clips, I really like the Canny clips. These are the Canny System ridge clips for PVC. PVC snaps into them, and once you get a bunch of these connected, these things do not move. They're rock solid in the crazy wind we get up here. So those do the ridges. Over here, you can kind of see this clip I have that is geared for pixels that are kind of towards the back of the house, but that I want to face the street. So this clips in from the opposite side on the back side here, and it's raised up higher. Don't know if you can see that too well, but it raises this a little bit higher so that these wires don't hit the pixels, and they can push in and orient facing towards the street. So these are like kind of my backside pixel clips, and these also happen to have a little cavity here for the wire to run wire on them, since in my case that's what I have. If we go more towards the front of the house, you see the traditional style shingle clips. So these clip on, as you can see, from the back side here, and the pixels just face outward and towards the street. So that's what I have most of the pixels here that do the outline on the shingles. The other clip variety I have is on my gutters. So over here you have these gutter clips, and they snap into the gutters like so, and the opening is on the back side, since that's how I'm accessing these. I actually have another variety that opens from the front side if you're pushing the pixels in from, say, on a ladder. This is just easier since I'm accessing them from the roof. No other functionality difference on them, so that just clips in there for the gutters. Those hold really well. Up here we have one of my receivers boards are in there, just 4 ports, and that controls everything in this little quadrant, including that Gilbert Engineering starburst, which hangs below that peak there. Over here you can see another receiver board. This one's a little different, so we'll open up this guy. Tight squeeze in here, but this one I have the receiver board and a distro board, and it's just providing a little bit of power because on my pixel bulbs I'm wrapping around the whole house, so there's a little bit of voltage loss there because of the large distance I'm running. It's kind of more of the way I just did it when I first started and wasn't testing stuff, kind of just went off. Everyone said you had to power inject after X number of pixels, so I just did it, and it's just kind of the way the system was built, so I haven't changed it. There's no reason to, but I probably could get away with less of it now. But it does help for props like here, the spin reel. So I'm running this off one port, but I'm also injecting power as well in it, just because this one, I think 540 pixels, so a little much off one port to be running at 20% brightness. But what's really cool is how the system mounts, and some of you may have seen my vinyl siding mounts, and I don't know how good of a look we can get here. I might be able to get a better look on this side, but you can see this uses the hooks that clip under the vinyl siding, and then I built this 3D printed mount here, and the EMT clips into it, and there's a little screw you can see that, so this is actually screwed in, and I can access the screw from that little hole I put in there, and that screws this whole thing in. So I have horizontal piece, vertical piece, and I didn't really have a spot here because of the window, so I went down and built this little shoe here. This kind of goes in, and this thing's been rock solid. This also sits on this metal flashing a bit, so it does take some of the weight off. Not that it's needed, but you know, I had this opportunity here, so I just did it. That's the line there. It goes down to the icicles because I have to break those up. I'm running, I think, off the top of my head, now I can't remember how many icicles. 240, I think, without injection, or between points on it. Yeah, somewhere around there. Then over here, another one. This one's a little different just because I have room to expand here, so we have 2 receivers and a power distribution board. Again, same thing. This is controlling all the props around this side, here, and the spin reel over here. So you can see over here I had to do things a little bit differently with this spin reel because of the window that's directly behind it. So the mounts here for the horizontal stick out just on the other side of the window, so you get a little bit better view of them with the vinyl siding hooks, and then the mounting piece and the separate piece that the EMT clips into. So those are actually 2 separate pieces that are bolted together after construction and attached right there. And these things have worked great, and all the wind here, they have not moved whatsoever. They've been rock solid. So that's pretty much it here with the display. I hope you've enjoyed everything. You can see kind of a little bit different perspective up here of everything in the house. We have the pixel poles, the AC stuff, the tree, and then the snowflake tower over there. Next year, hopefully, we'll finally get the winterberry trees. I've had them programmed for 2 years and didn't make it in, so I have a couple there. And then they would sprinkle kind of along. I have 11 of them that kind of go here behind the pixel poles and just have a nice kind of background accent and layering that would come around there. And some more back in this area. And I think I'm going to add some piece stakes kind of interwoven in the front half of the display that kind of wind through all the props. So still thinking about that and how I'll fabricate it. But anyhow, that's the display for 2019. Hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned for next year.